Hello, and welcome to an introduction to supervision, where I'll be looking at what it is, how it works, and why it's so important. My name is Sophie Regent. I'm an integrative psychotherapist, a practicing music therapist, and I've also trained as a creative arts supervisor. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we are going to be looking at the overarching definition of supervision, which breaks down into 3 different components. And we'll be drilling then down into clinical supervision, which is really what today is about, what we're discussing today. And then we'll look at 2 different formats that this clinical supervision comes in, which is either as a one-to-one or in a group setting. So we'll have a little bit of a look at how they might feel different, what might go on in a session. And then finally, a brief summary of what I've spoken about today. So I'm going to start with this definition, and it comes from the Healthcare Professional Council, who are the statutory regulatory body for 15 caring professions. And they define supervision as, while there is no single or agreed definition of supervision, at its core, supervision is a process of professional learning and development that enables individuals to reflect on and develop their knowledge, skills, and competence through agreed and regular support with another professional. Obviously, it's quite a mouthful, and even the HCPC say there is no single or agreed definition. So already there's a lot to get through, but I thought I would pull out a few phrases that I think are really important in this discussion that we're having today. So one is professional learning and development, and that is a key component that arises out of any supervision where you're looking at your own practice. It's your own learning from others, from your supervisor. That's very important. This phrase, reflect on and develop. So reflection, again, we don't often get time to really have that space to sit and reflect, which can really help with our own understanding in being able to take that time. And then finally, the regular support with another professional. Regular, and we'll talk a little bit later on what that means, but support. So this really is something to help you, to aid you, and to offer you some support, both with your peers and also with a professional supervisor. So I mentioned in the introduction that the broad definition of supervision is made up of 3 separate components. So let's briefly look at those now. The first is this top one. It says practice clinical, and that's actually the supervision we are talking about today. And it's defined as it's there to support learning and develop competency related to your specific work, your everyday work. Professional supervision is more focused on your competency, identifying professional learning. It's more ad hoc. It might be a course, and it's a continuing CPD overview. And then thirdly is the operational line management, and I think this is what people often think supervision is when you say the word. And this will be done at work. It usually focuses on the organisation. It'll often be done by your line manager, and it may incorporate personal objectives. So there is an element of appraisal in it. And what I wanted to say here and make clear is that supervision that is being offered here is not line management or operational. It's that first one. It's the reflective place, that supportive space. So HCPC go on to say supervision can support a culture of openness and candour and can help registrants meet our expectations by providing the opportunity to reflect on their practice and discuss challenges with the support and guidance of another professional. And there again, we see that phrase, reflect, or that word reflect, and how important it is in this process. So let's have a little bit of a drill down into clinical supervision, what it's about. So I'm starting off that first point, confidential space. And I will go on and talk a little bit more about this later on, because it is, I think, slightly different when you're in a one-to-one than when you're in a group setting. But overall, the sense is the space that you're offered to come to is confidential. What you say stays where it's said, unless, of course, there is some kind of safeguarding issue, in which case it will then click into your normal safeguarding procedure of the place, your workplace. So it's a support mechanism. It's a place to sound out ideas that you may have that you don't get to sound out anywhere else. There is no objective that has to be reached. There's no tick list. You're not being appraised in that way. And it's more about this journey together, which is where I've put emphasis on process. No judgment. Again, I say this is not performance management. You're not being praised. And also I, as the supervisor who's holding the frame, so to speak, I'm not there to judge you. And I'm not sitting with a judgy hat on my head. What I would say is that sometimes things tip into your own stuff, which is why I put not counselling. Often the supervision space is a place where you discover that, or you can name it, or you find out, oh, this doesn't feel right. And it's a place where maybe you say to yourself, or I might say, oh, I think perhaps that needs to be taken maybe to a counsellor. But having said that, the act of sharing and feeling emotions around your workplace and about things that have happened or come up in your work invariably does have a positive effect on your emotional well-being. That final point's really important. It supports your emotional well-being. And again, the emphasis is on the support structure and the fact that you have a chance and a space to talk about a situation. And often I found in supervision that sometimes just naming it is enough to help process it. So we're going to have a look now at one-to-one supervision, where it is just you, the supervisee, with a supervisor in the space. So you can see it's a cyclical diagram here. There is no beginning and end, although you may feel that issues you do manage to resolve or find help with them. So we'll just start in this right-hand corner, which is that you would come with a concern or a dilemma, a situation. And then I, as a supervisor, might ask you questions. They might be practical questions, just trying to get more of a picture. Or they might be more other aspects of what's going on I might ask you about. And then it says supervisor forms a hypothesis, which is really just a kind of complicated way of saying I get an idea of what might be going on, and I'm going to feed that back to you. And then you, as a supervisee, will also reflect on what you've just said and what you've brought to the session. And then this is the important bit, really. It's together the supervisor and the supervisee develop thoughts and ideas, have a two-way discussion about what's going on. And it's through this bit, this process of doing this, that the hope is that you would feel either more confident about what's going on in that situation, if you have a bit more insight, or you might even find it helps to resolve what's going on and your issue of concern is resolved. And then you would feed back to me, possibly at a later date, about what's gone on. And so the circle continues. So that really is the process of what happens in supervision. So moving now to group supervision, it's the same fundamentals really, but obviously it's a different format because suddenly you have more people. They're not going to be huge groups at all. Hopefully around about 6 people in a group feels the most comfortable. But however, there are obviously other people there. So that's why I've put setting a contract with the group as my first part of the format. And this is to ensure that everybody feels respected and valued. So again, this idea of confidentiality is really important when you've got a number of individuals in the space. And we would always ask that you don't talk about any material that someone's brought to the space unless you have their explicit permission to do so. So obviously confidentiality is the same in terms of everything stays in the space unless it's a safeguarding issue. And I think it's worth saying at this point that I am an external supervisor. I don't have an affiliation with BCAT at all. I don't report back. I'm not reporting back to management what's going on. And I think this is really important. Sometimes you may want things to be discussed outside of the session, but that is something we would all agree to as part of our contract. So firstly, I would always do a check-in. Now, obviously, each supervisor is going to run sessions in a different way. There is no blueprint that we all follow, but obviously, because we have a number of people, we need to be able to check in to see how everybody is. Now, I would normally do that in a possibly a non-verbal, might do it in a visual way, with art or looking at pictures, but it could just be spoken. It may just be a supervisor says, how are you all doing today? So in some way, we will, as supervisors, check in with you to see how you all are. And then the main activity really is if you think back to the one-to-one diagram that I showed, that's what goes on in the main activity, but we need to negotiate as a group how that might be. So it may be that you want to take it in turns to bring things. It might be that it gets highlighted in the check-in who wants to bring something. So it's really up to us. It's up to your supervisor and your supervisees to agree on a format that serves you all best. And it may be that it needs to change over time. When some weeks you might need something different, but essentially that's the form that it will take. And then finally, I would always do some kind of grounding or brushing off or something to help you leave whatever you've brought in the room, but different supervisors will all do it in a different way. So that is basically what your group format would look like. And maybe just before I go on to my final summary sheet, maybe pause the video and just think, if you have a pencil and paper for a couple of minutes, how might this help me in my work? Are there issues that actually this would really help? Can I see how it could enhance what I'm doing and support me? So maybe take that time for yourself to think about that. So just to surmise really, what is supervision? Well, we've discussed this. It's a forum for professional self-reflection, and it's a place for you to discuss your clinical work or whatever type of work that you are bringing, because I know that you're all doing different things at different aspects of BCAT. How? So we're going to meet regularly, preferably at the same time, but I think there needs to be some flexibility at the moment. And it may be that there are some chance for face-to-face contact, or it might all just be on Zoom, depending on which groups that you sign up to. So at the minimum, you would need to meet every month, but it may be possible to meet more often than that at the moment. And then finally, I'm hoping that this has really come across the why, and it's there to support your emotional well-being and your clinical practice. It's a chance to reflect on your work, and it's a real sense check of your own responses to things with your group and your supervisor. So I'm really hoping that this has given you a sense of what supervision can offer you. But if you do have any more questions, if this has brought some more queries up for you, please don't hesitate to get in contact with Dawn, and you'll see her details there and her email address. So please do get in contact. Thank you very much for listening.